Good morning, South Africa. Good morning, everyone who's joining us. My name is Masingita Masunga. I will be your moderator for today. I know it's South Africa. We have lots of problems. We have a country with no cabinet, but for the next 1.5 hours, let's forget about all the other problems and let's focus on this issue of disability and gender-based violence. As a person with a disability, this is something that I have to deal with on daily basis. Gender-based violence, not because I have a partner who is violent, but because as a woman with a disability, yes, I'm unseen and unheard. So almost everyone interact with me with some form of violence. And the main reason for that is that we may be 30 years into democracy, but disability is still seen as a welfare issue rather than a human right issue that is part of the transformation agenda. I hope that our conversation today will look at it from that perspective more than anything else, from the diversity and transformation aspect, because every one of us, I assume here, is affected by issues of diversity and transformation. So the very thing that you want for yourself as a woman when we speak gender equality, that's what I want as a woman. One of the biggest challenges of being a woman with a disability is that the most violence that we experience is actually from other women who see themselves as better or superior human being than you. And it's because already as women, we are marginalized. And unfortunately, as a society, we're looking for the next person that seem to be inferior. And I hope those are some of the issues that we're gonna touch on today as we speak about the violence. Things like infantilization, the fact that as a woman or as a person with disability, I get infantilized. People speak or interact with me like I'm a child. So the biggest causes of violence towards women and children and people with disabilities at large is the issue of stereotype stigma that is attached to that, and that leads to exclusion, which leads to violence. I hope we will have a beautiful conversation. And now I will just take you through the agenda for today so that we all have an idea what's gonna happen. We're going to start with Miss Sazini. Sorry, I'm going through my notes. We're going to start with Miss Sazini, the CEO of Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Fund. I will give an introduction of each and every speaker as they come to speak, because if I read all the introduction, by the time the last speaker comes on, you would have forgotten who they are. And anyway, we need a break, at least so that while I'm reading the bio, we're going back to what was said before. Another thing that's a challenge with disability is that people tiptoe around the issues, and they think that doing us a favor. Actually, that causes more harm than good, because we cannot overcome what we want confront, which includes sometimes the terminology. People are afraid to use the word disability. It is a disability. It is what it is. So as we have this conversation, can we be open? There is no wrong, there is no right. We are all here to learn. We are all here to overcome our own unconscious biases that we probably all have looking at one another, because we are all human at the end of the day. Um, the next speaker, before I go, before I waste time, is Miss Azini, who will give us an overview of, or who will let us know why we are here today. And I will read a bio now so that I don't want to tell you. I was told, let me tell you, I was told that I must tell you who's coming after who. I'm not going to do that, because you will decide that I know I don't like this one. So I'm going to get my coffee. I want us to treat each and every speaker with equality. So if you rehearse who you want to listen to, who you don't want to listen to, we will have a problem. So I'm not gonna tell you, let's keep, I always say I like doing things a little bit different. So let's keep the speakers as a surprise. Maybe there's a crush of yours who's on there. So make sure that you look good. You never know who's here. Okay. So while Miss Sazini Mutapidu is preparing herself, let me tell you who is she is. Sazini is a tricycle leader with experience of working in government, corporate, and the not-for-profit. That's a new word for me. I know non-profit, so it's called not-for-profit. I told you we are here to learn. Not-for-profit sector. She is a seasoned social impact executive with over 20 years experience in the private, public, and not-for-profit sector. Sazini's distinguished career includes leadership roles at Absa Bank and the economist bad. So it means you know what to do. Where she managed corporate citizenship and community investment, including oversight of the Absa Foundation Trust, a Harvard Business School. She is that educated, guys. Harvard graduate. She holds a master's degree in development studies and an honors degree in social transformations from the University of Cape Town. Passionate about empowering women and youth, she tirelessly pursues her mission to make a tangible difference in their lives. Sazini further serves as the chairperson of the Southern African Trust, further exemplifying her commitment to social justice. She is currently the CEO of the GBVF Response Fund. Let's welcome this beautiful woman.
Thank you, Singi, for that introduction. When people introduce you, it's always one of those where you are listening and thinking, oh my goodness, is that the work that I have done? But I must say that today is an honor for me to be speaking to you today. And welcome to all the people who have joined us online. And a special thank you to Mail and Guardian for partnering with us on this journey. And I say journey because this is our first webinar. We have a series that will be running, which will be focusing on intersectionality of gender-based violence. So I will not, as Singi said, tell you what the rest will look like. So we keep the surprise element. But I would like to then just touch briefly on the purpose of our webinar and why we're here today. I would like to rather read it and as we've prepared, so we make sure that there's a clear understanding of the objectives of today. And I want to thank all the speakers who you'll be listening to today for taking the time to share with you and share with us. And certainly we have been learning as we have started this journey and trying to make sure that we eliminate gender-based violence in South Africa. So let me just revert to my notes. People with disabilities are vulnerable to multiple forms of violence in their everyday lives, including structural violence, deprivation, and physical, emotional, and sexual exploitation. This is an argument that captures the core of our discussion today. And I want to also just speak to what Singi mentioned, the importance of looking at people living with disabilities from a human rights perspective, not a welfare perspective. And if we take that view, we then will start looking at how best to mitigate violence that they experience, but also how, as society, as institutions, and structurally, we create ecosystems that also deal with violence that they experience. And they are no different to the violence that we all experience. This important discussion comes at a critical time in South Africa's battle against gender-based violence and femicide. The World Health Study argues that the threat of violence against people living with disabilities is of particular concern in developing countries, given that both violence and disability are known to disproportionately affect underprivileged communities. Despite this known reality, there are still relatively few published studies and reports of the nature and extent of this problem. Today, we aim to explore this phenomenon further by engaging civil society representatives who are active in this space, development partners and community-based organizations to better understand this intersectionality and to enable optimized support to persons with disabilities in the GBV prevention programming. Our society's most vulnerable are often the least visible. And this holds particularly painfully true for persons with disabilities who are victims of gender-based violence. Children are often neglected and left prey to relatives and neighbors. Women are often exploited, sexually violated, murdered, and the myths and misconceptions continue to remain rife for those living with albinism. These are but a few examples of the complexities and challenges faced by persons with disabilities, which we need to work collectively as private sector, government, and civil society organizations and partners to confront. These stories of these individuals frequently go unheard, unnoticed, and they are further marginalizing them and perpetuating the cycle of silence and violation of their human rights and dignity. It is incumbent upon us as a collective to shed light on these issues, but also to listen and to act. Today's webinar is an outcome of a partnership between the GBVF and the Mail and Guardian, as already mentioned, but we seek to elevate the voices of persons with disabilities and address the systemic barriers they encounter. We aim to foster a nuanced understanding of the intersectionality between GBV and disability, and to spark collaborative efforts to develop a comprehensive and inclusive strategies to combat this pressing issue. We have three objectives for today's engagement. The first is to deepen our understanding of the intersection between GBV and disability, highlighting the unique challenges faced by individuals with disability. The second is to encourage collaboration among stakeholders, including disability rights organizations, government agencies, global development partners, and civil society groups to develop and implement comprehensive strategies for addressing GBV within the disability community. And lastly, we seek to outline actionable steps to increase awareness, prevention, and response to gender-based violence against individuals with disabilities focusing on building inclusive and accessible support systems and promoting a culture of reporting and accountability. As we embark on this critical conversation, let us remember that the true measure of our society's progress lies not only in what we say, but in the actions that follow. By shining a light on the experiences of persons with disabilities and working together to dismantle the barriers they face, we can create a more just, inclusive, and supportive environment where respect defines the fabric of our society. I want to thank the speakers and the audience for identifying the need to contribute to this critical conversation. And I look forward to our productive discussions and impactful changes and actionable steps that will follow. I thank you. Over to you, Singh.
Thank you, ma'am. Let me tell you a secret. eh? I told you we will have surprises. So, when we were preparing, one of the things that I liked that Sally did, she was making sure that she looks gorgeous. There is nothing that I love like when women do not apologize for being women. One of the violences that I find that we have sort of allowed, and not only from a disability perspective, but from a woman and gender perspective, we have allowed society to deny us to be feminine. So you find that I'm in a beauty and fitness industry, and people always say, "Oh, you've got brains and beauty." I'm like, no, 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 no. I've got beauty first, and I love that attention. I refuse to be made something I'm not, because the fact that you don't want me to be a woman who is proud of her looks, it's part of violence on its own. Talking about looks, our next speaker is a woman with albinism, and because of their skin pigmentation, people with albinism experience a lot of violence. Moreover, because of the stigma, like I said, and because of the stereotype, the murder rate for people with albinism is very high. So, in addressing gender-based violence, it goes beyond that just the issues of gender when it comes to people with albinism. And to share those type of experiences is Tobeka Mtetwa. And as I said, you would be surprised at what she does. Today is all about surprises. Just tell yourself you know nothing about anyone. We're here to learn. Tobeka Mtetwa is a visually impaired disability advocate. She serves as the provincial coordinator for the South African National Council for the Blind and trustee for the South African Disability Development Society's Forum Disability Sector, and provincial organizer for the KZN Civil Society Forum. Additionally, she's a member of the KZN South African Blind Youth Organization. After losing her sight in 2020, Tobeka shifted the rights and inclusion of blind and partially sighted individuals, particularly youth with disabilities. She has become a prominent voice on various platforms advocating for disability rights advocating for disability rights and empowerment. I made a mistake. Tobeka is not the one um with albinism, but let me tell you that shows I am human and I am here to learn. And I'm sorry, Tobeka, for that mistake. You welcome.
Okay. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for this beautiful opportunity. I'd like to thank the GBVF Fund, as well as the Mail and Guardian for creating this platform for persons with disabilities. As Masingita said, Masingita, you're forgiven. As she has said, my name is Tobe Mtetwa. I am a visually impaired woman and particularly youth. Yeah, even though I'm in the twilight of my youth. So today, mine is to, number one, as I've thanked this opportunity, what I always do is offer my voice. And I think I've made myself a voice for persons with disabilities. And this I've done as Masenta alluded, on various platforms. The reason why I do this is because, number one, as mentioned, I'm a recently visually impaired person. So I've had what I would say, the privilege of having experienced life on both sides of the coin, as a fully abled person and as a person with disabilities. So I think when it comes to the GBV subject and femicide, persons with disabilities are often left behind. And this is not just done by public sector, but it is done, I think, by society at large. Because like Masingita had said, we are seeing, number one, disabilities viewed in a medical form and as well as a welfare subject, which then moves away from seeing the humanness of persons with disabilities. When it comes to gender-based violence, I think we are at the cold face of gender-based violence as persons with disabilities due to a direct result of our disability. You find that children with disabilities, born with disabilities, start experiencing gender-based violence at an early age, but because and grow up with gender-based violence, but not knowing that it is wrong, because it has become a part of their lives. Because abuse for persons with disabilities comes in various forms. Number one, you would mention that abuse also, apart from violence or being hit and so forth and rape, but another form of abuse is deprivation, where in instances where a person will be deprived of their mobile accessibility devices or mobility machinery or whatever, whether it's wheelchair, whether it's whatever. So in order for them to get access to what they need to function optimally like others, they have to, at times, their bodies are used in a form of bartering for them to be able to just access their necessary basic needs. So I think as persons with disabilities, abuse for us is a very complex thing and very normal. It is so normal to the point that we do not know what is abuse, what is gender-based violence, and what is femicide, because we experience it on a daily. And not just coming from outsiders, also in our families. So I think as a person with a disability myself, and having walked into disability and seeing just how I experienced life
and understood what GBV was as a sighted person, I saw that my counterparts who are visually impaired, like I'm a blind woman, have serious challenges. Where number one, as I come to you, I'm coming to you live from Durban, and Durban is a city that houses the rape capital of the country. And it is dubbed the rape capital of the country because of stats of reported cases. Well, we all know that most cases go unreported. So what the real stats are may actually bring more numbers to already what is dubbed the rape capital, or actually find a rape capital or GBV capital elsewhere in the country. So I think that's the problem with persons with disabilities, that our crimes against us, go often unreported. Unreported in the sense that number one, there's mobility. You have to go to a police station to report a crime. Number two, when you get to the police station, the staff there and officials there are not trained to deal with persons with disabilities. You'll find a visually impaired woman being sexually assaulted, but will then be asked, can you identify the person? And that poses a challenge to a visually impaired woman. You'll find a deaf person being subjected to gender-based violence. When they go to the police station, they have no sign language interpreter, so then their crimes go often unattended to, because of our disabilities, as well as just structural discrimination as well. What I call structural discrimination is that just accessibility, like I think our abuse goes in many, I think can manifest itself in many facets. One, even the physical, like one thing, what I normally say, like just a sidewalk for a person, a pothole is a pothole to a sighted person, or a pothole to an able-bodied person. But a pothole to a woman in a wheelchair is the difference between her being able to go and report the crime against her and her living in abuse constantly forever. Because number one, these structural problems or infrastructural issues prohibit us from getting to where help is, because often help is not brought to us. So I think, as a suggestion and intervention, one, what I do in my daily work as a woman with a disability is partner and make sure that our voice as persons with disabilities is heard by all. So I partner with various stakeholders, where it's not that there's a shortage of research around disability and GBV. No, there's a lack of desire, or there's no appetite from some people or some corners of society to actually tackle the matter head on. So what I've done, or things that I've participated in, I make, like on radio stations, I make sure that persons with disabilities are able to get to hear what is available and what can be done for them. Because more often than not, they do not even know that they're experiencing abuse. And another thing is that even in advertising, we know that there are many interventions speaking against GBV, but you find that even adverts do not speak to persons with disabilities. Because in instances, you'll find, I think one such time is that you'll see an advert on television speaking on GBV and how to report GBV, but then they'll say, for a blind person, they'll say, dial the number at the bottom of your screen. But then that does not help me as a visually impaired person. So I think just little things like that, the collaboration is what I would suggest. Collaboration with persons with disabilities, with organizations of and for persons with disabilities. Because what is happening right now is that we are thought for. So people will come with innovation or interventions that they feel are correct for us as persons with disabilities, and not include us from concept level and to the implementation level. So it's just programs that are created for us, but not by us. But what we say as persons with disabilities everywhere we go is that there's nothing about us without us. Involve us. If there's innovation that you have, that innovation must include us from the onset. And that way you'll find that persons with disabilities will not be left behind. So I think organizations like the GBVF office, as well as Mail and Guardian, we'd like to thank you for this platform And also want to thank other stakeholders, other researchers, like currently the South African Medical Research Council has approached me to work with them on this to document the cases of women with disabilities who have experienced GBV in their lives. So this is welcome innovation in the sector, but we call for more collaboration, more consultation with the sector to if we are to make any change. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Tobeka. I just love how these women are time conscious. Tobeka was speaking more from a personal experience, being a woman with a disability. And on that note, let me take an opportunity to deal with an issue that most people may not be aware that it's actually not correct. If you listen to how correct, how Tobeka has been speaking on disability or identity, she always said people with disability or persons with disabilities. Terminology is one of those things that causes or that is used, words are used as a form of abuse. That is why, even as a country, with our ugly past, we had to deal with and get rid of certain words because were not appropriate. Actually, they were used to harm other racial groups. Therefore, even in disability, there are certain terminologies that are accepted, particularly by the UN Convention on Disability, which South Africa is a signatory. There's a word that people use and they feel like they're doing us a favor, but through which it's okay from an individual, because I always say to people when it comes to disability, there are individual preferences, which is fine. Ask a person what they prefer to be called. But from an official and a media point of view, the word living with disability is not correct because it was disapproved by the UN Convention on Disability. So don't be angry with me. I'm just a messenger who says we, we, we must learn because unfortunately even our government is not taking these things into consideration. That the word living with a disability is not supposed to be used officially. It's not supposed to be used in the media because it's not correct and it's got implications and connotations that are not correct. Now we're starting with the panel. The first two speakers were warming us up for the real conversation where we're going to put the meat to the bones and just learn what where are we going. But we cannot learn without unlearning. Actually, the biggest part of learning is unlearning. So, as we unlearn, we will have Gugu Shongwe Kara, who is the CEO of Save the Children South Africa. You can see that I like this. You can see the type of women. You know, one of the things that we deal with as people with disabilities is the fact that when it comes to disability issues, it's by the way. So the caliber of speakers, you can see that they are not the by the way kind of speakers. Gubishonga Kaba is the CEO of Save the Children South Africa. Gugu is a public health specialist at heart, passionate and dedicated to influencing the world for good holistic health, physical, mental, social, emotional, and spiritual. That's what I do as well, Google, so that you know. Throughout the life cycle of all human beings, Google has a wealth of experience and knowledge of the development and humanitarian sector. Commitment to leading evidence-based interventions that positively impact communities. She is an eco leader that facilitates sustainable social change and harnesses the power of collaborative effort. Google believes in individuals and groups that need to drive the change they would like to see in their lives with support from existing structures. I love your hand, Miss Google. Welcome.
Sorry. Good morning, good morning, good morning, South Africa. It's a beautiful day. And here we are today, very, very privileged to be talking about violence and people living with disability. I would really like to indicate that it's a pity that South Africa has normalized violence to an extent that we can hardly even define it. But now, as Save the Children South Africa, we are here to say there is a need for everyone, whether you're a child or you're an adult, you have a responsibility to ensure that you are safeguarding the people that you're living with. Firstly, when we talk about safeguarding, we're basically looking at the fact that human beings, most of people that are living with disability, are living within an environment and they are also living with people. That now tells you immediately you are dealing with an environment. It could be physical, it could be electronic, it could be socio-cultural. It has an effect on the person. And then the person now becomes vulnerable because of how this environment is interacting with that particular individual. You can put the slides on, Sean. So very important for us to understand that we are dealing with an environment and we're dealing with people that are likely to be causing or compromising a particular individual. And I'd like to also share data in the next slide, Sean. Data that is actually showing us the vulnerability of people that are living with disabilities. And in this case, I'm going to focus a lot on children because I am from Save the Children South Africa. One thing that we also have learned is that it is impossible for us to talk about children and exclude adults because children are brought up by parents and caregivers that are adults. Now, what we have seen, and WHO gives us this data to say, people with disability are almost 4 times likely to be violated. And violence, let me explain, anything that makes an individual uncomfortable is defined as violence and should be clearly understood by the people around. It could be a word that you're saying, and if it causes discomfort, it means the person is violated. It could be physical violence, it could be emotional violence, cultural issues that influence the life of an individual. Tobeka earlier on mentioned even the fact that there are potholes and there's a person who's using a wheelchair. It means their ability to access services is not enhanced, and that is violating that individual's right to life. And the other thing that we should indicate is that when there is this exposure to being violated, it means a person with disability is even 4 times unlikely, one, to be able to report, excuse me, or to disclose the fact that they have been violated. The ability for them to even talk about it, because maybe they have a disability that affects their communication. Sorry. Sorry. The stigma that is around being violated, at times they are not able to even talk. The dependency they have on the individual that is taking care of them, or the fact that they have been groomed to understand that that violence is normal, or they are ignorant, or it could be they are being exploited openly, or the carer is displaying their power over that individual. So power dynamics do influence an ability to speak up about violence. It becomes even worse for a person that has disabilities, because they may be dependent on the individual that is powerful. Excuse me. Also, the fact that there's inaccessible confidantes because one has a disability. There's inaccessible people that can provide support and counseling, because please remember, as I said, there's an environment, there are people. Now, if the people are inaccessible to the person that is living with a disability, it means their safety is compromised. Next slide. Now, safeguarding a person or people that are living with disabilities, it's basically ensuring that the environment they are in is safe, physically and otherwise. The people that are around them are providing support and they are safe, so that that particular individual cannot be injured in that particular environment. So creating this safe environment is safeguarding the individual and ensuring that their life can go on and they can access the services that they need and they can be comfortable in the environment they are in. Remember, as soon as a person is uncomfortable, it says there is violation of some of their rights. And worst of all, then, if they can be harmed in an environment or abused physically, sexually, and otherwise, it means that individual is not safeguarded. So when we safeguard, we provide the environment that is safe. And as people, we live in homes, we live in school, we spend a lot of our time in schools, we also spend a lot of our time in the workspace and in other structures like youth centers or homes for children. Now, if those particular homes are not creating an environment that's providing the safety, it means there's no safeguarding. That is why these structures that I've mentioned need to have either its policies, if it's an institution, and if it's a home, we just need to create values that indicate how much we care for each other, how much we create safety and security around us. Next slide. And this is important because we are supposed to safeguard everyone. As Save the Children, we look out for the fact that a child is safe. We look out for the fact that any person that is at risk simply because they cannot see, simply because they cannot hear, simply because they cannot walk on their own, that person needs to be safeguarded. And any other person that needs assistance, whether because they are a child or because they are unable because of an illness or any other, those people need to be safeguarded. And the safeguarding, next slide, Sean. The people that need to be safeguarded is because there are multiple exposures, and the speakers that spoke before me have mentioned some of the challenges that can happen. We are safeguarding children and adults, one, because they are living with a disability. But we have seen in South Africa right now that 30% of violations are physical violence that is happening in a home in many instances with people that know each other. There's also neglect. Simply because I cannot walk on my own, I cannot go and collect water on my own, people will neglect me and not give me the water that I need. And the fact that I can be emotionally violated, and data has also shown us of late that emotional violence is growing, which means that 30% of physical violence that I spoke about is being surpassed by emotional violence. And emotional violence is even more painful and long-lasting, and it has serious effects even compared to physical violence. So it's important to take note of the fact that the people that are unseen, unheard, like people that are living with disabilities, besides physical violence, are exposed to a lot more emotional violence and exploitation and the grooming that I spoke about earlier on. Next slide, Sean. Now, we've got different ways of dealing with safeguarding, and the basic principles are the fact that we spread education. And Tobeka mentioned earlier on that as she goes through the radio stations, as we speak here today, we are educating South Africa on the value of safeguarding people that are living with disabilities. We are speaking about ensuring that you understand what it means to violate another. And we want to teach people about how we can prevent the violence that is occurring. The fact that South Africa right now is ranking in the top 5 countries in the world that are violent, it means we have done very little in terms of preventing the violence. Thus, we are at a point now of having to report it, of having to respond to it. And this is something that must stop. And we believe that every South African wants the best for themselves, and they should want the best for the person that is next to them. And thus, we are encouraging that people must report. When you report violence, you are reporting because you're suspecting, and it's correct to report because you're suspecting, because it's better to report a suspicion than to wait until a violation has occurred and a person's life has been even more destroyed than it was before. And yet you saw that there could be a problem there. And of course, we need to respond when we know about the violence, which means we need to teach even the people in the police stations to learn how to talk to a person that has cannot see, or a person that cannot hear, so that we are relevant, because that relevance is part of the response that needs to happen, because you are giving this person an opportunity, you are giving them a voice, and you are hearing them. In that way, we will be able to make a difference. Next slide. And I just want to pick up on this slide because these are the main principles of dealing with violence. I've spoken to the fact that we need to prevent it from occurring because the amount of damage that happens because of us not preventing violence from occurring is even worse, such that we end up not being able to respond appropriately. So very important to take note of the state of children, the state of adults that we are living with, and creating a safe environment and ensuring that it can be sustainable. Because in many instances, as soon as a person that is living with disability is left alone, already we are creating an environment that is unsafe, because what if they have hurt themselves? So unfortunately, because of the fact that we have people that are living with disabilities, as organizations, we have to ensure that we create more resources that are made available in communities, and thus in awareness, in education, we're even educating community-based organizations on how to safeguard people that they are living with, so that we have more people that are doing this work. And this actually becomes an opportunity to educate. It becomes an opportunity to have people in communities contributing positively and influencing the change that we want to see in our communities, and on a day-to-day basis, safeguarding the environment that we are in. Next slide. And we've got different platforms. And as Tobeka was talking, I was asking myself, where in these reporting channels do we provide an opportunity for a person that cannot see to be able to report any violence that could be imminent or that has occurred already? We are talking about email for people to report on. We are talking about phones. We are also talking about calling. For Save the Children, in this case, is calling leadership in Save the Children. We've got focal persons for each of our programs. We've got organizations, community-based organizations, and other civil society organizations that are point of call when I am suspecting a violence from occurring. And safeguarding, I must emphasize, is more about us preventing the violation from occurring. And so it means we must always be on the lookout to see what are the experiences of the people around us, so that we can be able to care for them even before they raise their voice. With people living with disability, you are facing a situation where they can not even talk for themselves. So we need to be advocates and speak for them and ensure that we can prevent violence from occurring. My last slide is basically summing up the fact that, next slide, Sean. My last slide is summing up the fact that when we talk about safeguarding, we're basically talking about respect for self and respect for the next person that is around you. And in this case, we're focusing on people that are not seen and that are not heard, and making sure that they are given a voice, and creating an environment that is trustworthy for them to be able to even raise their voice about any violence, and making sure that no one is harmed, no matter what the circumstance. No one has a right to harm the other. And prevention, I've spoken to it a lot. And again, it means whether in school, whether in a home, whether in a workspace, we have to ensure that we have policies and guidelines that are protecting people from violating each other, instead enhancing respect for each other, and living in an environment that is safe. And reporting, we can never over express the fact that it's important to report. Let me indicate, whether you are suspecting violence is occurring, you have a right to report. Whether violence is already occurring, you have a right to report. You have that responsibility. Let us serve and be advocates for each other, and make sure that we stop the violence that is so vibrant in South Africa. Thank you very much. Singi, over to you.
Ms. Good, good. That was enlightening. And talking about children, the other day I saw a Facebook post that said, please teach your children to be nice to children with special needs. I responded to that post on the comment and I said, I would rather have children who are taught equality and inclusivity. Because when you teach children to be just nice to children with disabilities, you are teaching them that they are superior. And that's one of the challenges that's there, where people feel like having a disability, you are inferior. So we must be careful what we want people to understand: equality and inclusivity. Because most nice people actually, they're not even kind. And what we need is kindness, not niceness. I guess I was so looking forward to the next speaker that I even mistaken Tomeka's identity for hers. So, and I hope I'm forgiven for that. Yeah, I'm such a beautiful lady that you just have to forgive me. I tell people all the time, so I wear steady toes. I love my steady toes. And people always say, with your coordination disability, don't you think you'll fall um, in those editors? I'm like, you just said it. I've got a coordination disability. So I will fall anyway. I might as well fall in style. Our next speaker is Ntriki. I even like that the fact that Ntriki is spelled differently. For the first time, I see Ntriki spelled this way. Ntriki Loteni holds an honors degree in industrial psychology from Fort Hare University and a master's in management from Wits University. Her career began in 2005 as a human resources intern at the National Treasury. I'm dealing with finance people. Today, I tell you, we need that because the economy is not good. She worked at Treasury for 7 years and left the organization as deputy director in 2012. Later, she joined the Department of Trade and Industry and Johannesburg Water, respectively, where she addressed issues of inequality, unfair discrimination, and institutional culture. After 7 years with Johannesburg Water, she accepted a role at the University of Pretoria as director. Ms. Loteni plays a significant role in civil society work. She is a member of the National Albinism Task Force of South Africa, advocating for the rights of persons with albinism. She is also a founder of Ibutolezwe Foundation, a non-profit organization that drives work on access to inclusive education and employment of persons with albinism. Welcome, Ms. Lotani.
Thank you for that introduction, Singi. Like the first speaker said, sometimes when these things are read, you also wonder, are they talking about me? Thank you so much for the opportunity from the GBVF Fund, as well as Mail and Guardian, to give us the platform to talk about these important issues. I like the fact that listening from the first speaker up until the previous one before me, the consistency of the message to show that indeed these issues play themselves there in our different spaces the same way. Today, I have been tasked to deal with the structural and the discriminatory practices that results in homicide. That will include also issues of gender-based violence. And I'm talking with the lenses of persons with albinism. I am the beautiful 2-in-1. So I will talk about issues of albinism in particular. We are that vulnerable group that is at the minority within even the disability sector. Sometimes we are unseen and our issues are not heard as other issues that people raise because we are a minority, but our issues are very complex. You will see as I go through quickly through my presentation, which I will request that it be put up. First, the Singi mentioned the issue of how we tiptoe around this terminology. And albinism is one of those that people sometimes are not sure what to say. And most of these issues that I will be talking about now emanates from the misunderstanding, the misconception about albinism as a condition. So in my talk today, first I thought that there is a need that I settle this one. What is albinism? Because I don't want to assume that everyone that is in the room understand it the same way. Is albinism a disability? Because we find that a lot where we have to explain ourselves why albinism is a disability. I will settle that one as well. And then I would look into the core of why we are here, the structural and the discrimination practices that impact persons with albinism. All right. And I would look at the implications of that, those unintended consequences and the recommendations, because it is important that we come out of fear knowing exactly what then are we saying about these issues. It's good to raise them, but what then? What are we going to do about them? So already some of the speakers have spoken to these issues to show that these are issues that are already there, known. The next slide. So I will be very brief and very specific on this one because I want you just to pick up the key things which results in these issues that we are having about what is albinism. It is a non-contagious genetic inherited condition. That is very important because some of the discrimination that we suffer as persons with albinism is this issue about albinism being a contagious disease. People think, right? Albinism is non-contagious. It's a genetically inherited condition. And because of that, it is a result of the melanin that we don't have. As you can see that me, myself, as a person with albinism, I have a complete absence of melanin. Some people might have a form of melanin in their skin. That's when you will see them with some brown patches in their skin. But for me, I have complete absence of melanin, right? That is what makes us to have the pale skin because it affects our skin, it affects our eyes, which is the visual impairment, and also you can see with our hair. That's what albinism is about. And how then one can have a child with albinism. It's very clear. Both parents must be the carrier of the gene, right? For example, both my parents have melanin. They have dark skin, but they have given birth to the three of us with albinism. That means both my parents were carriers of the gene, and they had the 25% chance of giving birth to us as children with albinism. So in a nutshell, that's the understanding that I want us to have about albinism. Now let's settle the second one. Is albinism a disability? The next slide. Singi mentioned the importance of the UN Convention, the CRPD as we all know it. And if you look in terms of the preamble of the CRPD, in its development, I think it foresaw that disability is an evolving terminology. At first, it was looked at as disability is the act of God. Maybe that family has committed a sin and all those beliefs. And then it moved to be looked at as a medical condition. But now we are looking at it with the lens of social model, which is what here the CRPD or the convention is explaining, that because of my interaction, when I say mine, a person with albinism, which has an impairment, because of my interaction with the attitudinal or the environmental barrier that is being posed to me, that's what caused or hinder full participation for me as a person with albinism equally to the other person. Now, it takes away this notion that disability is my problem, the impairment is my problem. It brings out that because of my impairment and the interaction with the environment around me, it can be an environment that is for a person with albinism. You come into a building, everything is written in small print. How, as a person with albinism, will I be able to cope in that? Or you come in an environment where there are attitudes. Already people have perception about albinism, right? And because of that interaction, they make it difficult for me to function equally. So that's what the CRPD settles albinism as well as a disability. Because I know there is a lot of these questions out there. So from now on, use what the CRPD is saying and qualifying why albinism is a disability. Now let's talk about the structural and these discriminatory practices in relation to gender-based violence and homicide. I've already spoken about the misunderstanding about albinism and the way that people view our physical appearance, right? Which is the object, because that's the key of this erroneous belief. People look at us as if we are these particular individuals that are coming from somewhere and we are carrying these magic powers, all these stereotypes, all these beliefs. These are all based on how people view albinism, right? And these are the things that perpetuate, right, the discrimination, perpetuate the marginalization of persons with albinism, including the hate crimes against us, which I will further elaborate on that. The stigma, the stereotypes, all these things that are there for persons with albinism. Someone mentioned the emotional abuse that we go through and the impact of that psychologically. Sometimes it's not being thought of for a person with albinism. The constant discrimination, the constant rejection by our society, which results in most persons with albinism suffer from depression and sometimes some committing suicide. I know sometime last year, I think it was last year, where we had a number of our young persons with albinism committing suicide because of the constant rejection and because they are not empowered enough to say, how do I respond to these issues, which is something that I will talk about, right? So because of this constant discrimination that we go through, persons with albinism suffer that effect. And because of this constant discrimination, which perpetuate these hate crimes, that is a critical issue. Now I have picked up some few of these structural prejudice and discriminatory practices. One, the social stigma. Already that has been elaborated enough, how society discriminates us because of how we look, right? Or the superstitions they have, the myths that they have, the misconceptions that they have about albinism. Lack of inclusive education. We all know that education is key in terms of economic empowerment. And because of that, we will see the implications of that, which lead to issues of violence, issues of homicide for persons with albinism. Children with albinism find themselves being separated from their parents at a young age because either there is security risk or the school next door is not accessible to them. Now they find themselves that they have to go and stay somewhere. They might be exposed even there to other issues of violence. So the issue of inclusive education in our mainstream schools is very important for persons with albinism for various reasons, which I will mention. The lack of employment opportunities, which is linked to the previous one. Because if you don't have enough education, you drop out of the schooling system that is not accommodative, it limits your opportunities to be economically independent as a person with albinism. And where does it leave you? What does it expose you to? Right? And those are the things that I will talk about in my next slide. And lastly, inadequate legal protection. Just before that, the issue of reporting. When we go and report these issues to the police, we are not taken seriously, right? And how even police themselves make a mockery out of these issues. I remember a friend of mine, I don't know the interaction, but it was with the police. And this is the comment that the police made. Wow, I've never had a sexual relationship with a person with albinism. What does that imply? This is the person that is supposed to protect you. And these are the kind of remarks that they are making when you go and report issues with them. So those are kind of things that makes even reporting for persons with albinism a problem. Now let's look at the implication of these. Mark these 4 issues. And remember there, just a minute, I did not even mention the issue of access to adequate health care, which is a very critical issue for persons with albinism. Tobeka mentioned the issue around deprivation, right? And for persons with albinism, the issue to access to healthcare, which is really dealing with the prevention of skin cancer. Skin cancer is one of the problems that face persons with is one of the problems that faces persons with albinism. Now, most of our people are really dying from skin cancer. And the fact that we are not able to produce data is a serious, serious challenge for us. And it's something that we are working with STES SA. We can't account for persons with albinism in this country. As a result, we don't know where services are really needed. Whether you talk services in terms of protection, services in terms of prevention, like issues of access to adequate healthcare, we cannot account where those services are mostly needed. So that's one of the issues, and I have not mentioned it there. Now let's look at some of these implications for persons with albinism. Here I'm saying women and girls with albinism are more likely to be victims of sexual violence. Why? The question might be, why is that? And we're saying they are more likely than men to be the victims of this. Number one, this issue of thinking that I'm doing you a favor as a person with albinism when someone approaches you, right? Who are you to say no? Because who will approach you anyway? Now that's the social stigma that we are dealing about. Two, the fact that persons with albinism themselves need to be empowered to know who they are, because there is this a need of belonging. They find themselves entering into this abusive relationship because they want to belong, right? Hence, we're saying women and girls with albinism are at the risk, right? The third one issue, which really makes them to be at a risk, is the fact that most persons with albinism, we know that because of the education system that is not inclusive, they find themselves dropping out of school. And now, because they are economically in need, they find themselves also in this abusive relationship. Secondly, the beliefs that are out there that when you have a sexual intercourse with a person with albinism, they will cure HIV and AIDS. These are things that are still there, that within certain segment of our society, people believe. Thirdly, the issue around security, safety and security of persons with albinism. Again, the myth that our body parts will make people rich. These are things that are there. Recently, we had a case at the Equality Court, which judgment will be released on the 31st of August in Verula, where we have taken one of the traditional healers, because some of them are the ones that are perpetuating this myth. And if you go to YouTube, probably it's still there, and you listen to that video that perpetuate these kind of things, saying if you have sexual intercourse with a woman with albinism, they will take all your luck. Now I'm talking about a recent case that will be ruled on the 31st of August by a traditional healer who is very influential, by the way, in society, spreading still this myth about albinism, putting the lives of persons with albinism at risk. Now we know, as women and girls with albinism, what does that mean? You will remember the case of a lady in Kwamhlabuya Lingana. That was someone who said, I love you. But that person was able to present this young girl to a traditional healer. And that was a case of homicide. So these are issues that we are dealing with. I'm concluding. And due to the lack of, again, education, employment, women and girls with albinism find themselves to be victims, or to be at risk of being now asked for sexual favors in order to get employment. And because they want to be economically free, they find themselves being victims. And lastly, we look into the issue around continuous the lack or the consequences of not having a legal protection. You report a case, nothing is done, it is not investigated, there is no prosecution on them. These issues are really serious issues in our system. And these are the issues that people think that I can do anything to a person with albinism and nothing will be done to me, right? And these are the things that really defeat or discourage persons with albinism in reporting these issues. Now that I have put all of these issues out there, what then? What then? What do we do about them? Now, which comes to my recommendation, which I think the previous speaker spoke about some of these issues. The need for increased awareness and campaigns about albinism. And this also talked to the disability sector as a whole to combat these stereotypes. Two, we need to empower young persons with albinism. Starting there, we need mentorship programs where young people with albinism will have that sense of self-identity and confidence about who they are. It is a need within our sector. We need to promote education system that is inclusive, that is accommodative to persons with albinism, that applies to disability as a whole, so that children with albinism are not separated from their families at a young age. Persons with albinism don't drop out of school and find themselves victims of sexual violence. We need to make sure that persons with albinism are upskilled with programs where they can be independent and be able to participate equally in employment opportunities. Issues of gender dimensions, right? When we look at these issues, I think it's Tobeka that said, sometimes when we talk about gender-based violence, it's like persons with disability, this intersectionality has always been forgotten. We are bringing now into the fore. Mothers of children with albinism, for example, they find themselves having to raise children on their own because the father said, I cannot have a child like this, disowning the family. And now that mother, what would that mother do? Maybe find another relationship where they can be economically supported as well. Now that even put the child with albinism at a risk that they can be abused in that whole setup. It's all of these things that we need to think about when we talk issues of gender-based violence and homicide, looking at all these intersectional lenses. And we need to look at strengthening the legal protection when it comes to reporting cases. The issue around the police, the whole judicial system, I would say, because it goes beyond reporting, investigations as well, prosecutions as well. I found myself having to educate at the Equality Court while I'm presenting my case because I could see that there was a lack of understanding about albinism as a condition and why what was said in that video amounts to hate speech. So those are some of the things that we need to look at. And lastly, someone already spoke about the importance of collaboration. We need more of this collaboration and partnership. We cannot do this work alone. We need to work together so that we can be able to say, how do we amplify our voices? I try to run through, but that's my story for today. I hope we will engage more on these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ziki. Thank you very much for your presentation. We're almost at the end of this webinar, and let me apologize that we are running a little bit behind time. Can you please bear with us just for the next 10 minutes, because they are critical questions that people want have, and you never know, these responses may save somebody's life. There is a question for Tobeka, and let me just go through my screen just to see uh, what's the question, and then Tobeka just be ready. Can you be very quick with your answer, Tobeka, so that we really respect people's time? Here's the question. Interesting, Tobeka, that you are doing research on the disability issue, on the disability issues. Just checking, how can we access publications? Any specific platform where the research papers are shared?
Message glib 13140 message glib 130 mic is muted. More options to be pathetic level everyone mute microphone stop cam button mute microphone button.
Oh, sorry. Apologies. Just to answer the question, with regards to the research that has been done, I did make mention of the South African Medical Research Council. You will find the publications there on their website, of the websites of the South African Medical Research Council, as well as something that I did not mention, or other interventions made with regards to GBV and disability, on how they can improve reporting for persons with disabilities. You can also touch base with Sonke Gender Justice. I think just last month, if I'm not mistaken, there was the process of formulating an app wherein persons with disabilities can use. So right now they're at the point where they're checking the accessibility of this app for persons with disabilities. So it's not that there isn't work in the sector, there is, but we call for more. So for the papers or research that I've spoken of, you are welcome to view the website of the Medical Research Council. Thank you. I hope I've answered the question.
Oh, please forgive me for that. So I'm managing time and managing the program because we are a little bit beyond the time allocated. Um, so for those of you who didn't know about GBVF Response Fund, if you've been asking yourself whether they do work or not, the next speaker is proof and evidence that they do exist and they do work. They are the beneficiaries of the GBVF fund. And to speak on their work is Sue van der Linde. Sue van der Linde, inspired by her late mother's work as a daycare mother and creche owner in South Africa, developed a profound passion for children. Sue founded Irish House Children's Hospice in 2011, honoring her late mother, Iris, driven by a passion to address the lack of services for special needs children and their families in South Africa. Sue has led Irish House to remarkable growth, starting with just two volunteer carers. Today, it supports over 670 families with comprehensive services, including respite care, physiotherapy, palliative care, and adaptive therapy. Under Sue's leadership, Irish houses innovated with projects like GBVF training, all ability victim support unit, and Color Club protective workshop, and carers at home. Social enterprise model, making a profound impact on the lives of vulnerable children. So welcome. You are our last speaker as we chase time.
Thank you, and thank you for the lovely introduction. It's a real privilege and an honor to be here, and I've been listening to the other presenters with a lot of interest. Everybody is really put so much value into this program, and I hope that our listeners are still there. I will keep it short. I am aware that we are running slightly over, and so let me summarize for you. So all of the speakers prior to myself have been speaking about the challenges, and I think one common thread ran through all of that, and that was the way persons with disability are treated or not treated when it comes to reporting GBVF crimes. That is where Iris House decided to step up. And, coming from a background of disability with Iris House, even though we focus on special needs children with life-limited or life-threatening conditions. And when I say children, I must explain that we do not have a cut-off age. So our children become adults. So, as we know, if you've got severe cerebral palsy, you turn 18, you've still got severe cerebral palsy. So we don't cut off. So even though children is in our name, we do have adults as well. But one of the things that we noticed with huge concern as we grew in our numbers, as was mentioned now by our moderator, when the figures went in was 678, we're actually over 700 children that we support now. So as these numbers grew, we started to see that not all children were well cared for, not all children were safe. And in fact, we had several cases of sexual abuse that we needed to deal with via our social work office. And the first thing we came up against was the lack of understanding and the lack of compassion and the lack of training from SAPs. And we realized that, we are never going to get these cases through to a court of law without changing how, from within, how the system works. You look at a nonverbal child and a mom who's trying to report a rape. We get a rape test done. It's positive for rape. We go to SAPS and straight away we have officers saying to mom, don't bother laying a charge. It's going to go nowhere. That is not acceptable. That is just not acceptable. And we decided we had to do something about it. Coincidentally, at that stage, we met with the GBVF Relief Fund. And I think it was definitely meant to be, because that was what gave us the funding we needed to move this program ahead. So if I can have some pictures up, please, Sean, of our first picture. So that horrible looking container, which was dropped at SAPS in Boertesig, was the beginning of what has now become a model, and it is a victim support and all ability victim support unit. And if we move on to the next slide, it was launched in 2022. And as you can see, the gentleman behind the mic is actually the head of SAPS for the province of the Western Cape. That is important because as we've moved this project forward, training SAPS officers, training first responders, and now putting in 2 more of these units, we've realized that we do not get the support on the ground. We have to bring in people like this lovely gentleman in the picture to ensure that SAPs take this seriously, because I'm constantly being told how busy they are. I absolutely agree with that, but you cannot be too busy to not be trained on disability. That I cannot accept. So we do leverage persons like the provincial commander for SAPs to get this project rolling. And at the moment, with our moderator mentioned this right in the beginning with the new government formation and so on, it's very difficult to get hold of these people, and some of them are sort of shifting between positions. So it's slowed us down a bit, but we will get back in the saddle shortly. Next slide, please, Sean. You can also see that we roped in the Premier of the Western Cape as well. Again, because these things are being ignored at ground level, we know that we are batting our head off a wall if we try to bring SAPS officers in for training, we try to bring first responders, social workers, and eventually prosecutors into this training. Without these people backing things, it's not going to happen. So we have brought them in, and we have managed to convince them how important this is. You and I know how important this is. Our leaders need to know too. Next slide, please. So that is inside the unit. To the left is the now ex-MEC for SAPS Oversight and Safety, MEC Regan Allen. I've already made an appointment with his successor, which is MEC Andrew Murray, because we cannot let the program stop with his going into Parliament now as Deputy Speaker. So as you can see, the inside of the unit is extremely child friendly. That is actually a photo of one of the Iris House children, one of our Superman posters, which we feel inspires other people. This child has severe autism. And this was the opening of the unit. So we break the unit up into a sensory area. We have wheelchair accessible desks where you can roll a wheelchair underneath. Obviously, the unit has ramps, and it also has handbars as well, grab bars. Inside the unit, we also have a iPad or a, I'm not sure what you call the ones that are on Apple, but yeah, iPads, which can connect to fantastic people like you see on the screen now doing my wonderful translation for me. So if a deaf person comes in, they can have a translator there. If a blind person comes in, they can get assistance by way of apps on this particular device. And we train our SAPS officers to do so. We even went as far as to put in weighted blankets into the unit, so that if a person is autistic and they feel that they are overwhelmed, which obviously they would be because they've just suffered a trauma, as would everybody, they can use the weighted blanket to good effect. So next slide, it may show it. Let's have a look, Sean. No, that's training. Never mind, we'll stop here. So there is a couch setting as well. So that particular unit is now about to be rolled out to 2 hotspots, crime hotspots, GBVF in particular. One is Delft and one is Mitchell's Plain. We've had our learnings from that unit, and now we want to roll out. We're going to keep the structure the same, and we are in the process of doing so at the moment. I also mentioned to you the training with SAPS officers. This is just one of the shots from a training I did actually on the West Coast in Saldanha. And these are all lady officers from SAPS who I was busy training how to communicate with nonverbals, with deaf persons, with persons with sight impairments or completely blind, persons in wheelchairs, across the whole spectrum of disability. And I must say, these ladies have become, and in fact, all the SAPS officers that we've trained have become really passionate about this topic. I think we must understand that it is not their intention, as in our first line of defense, to be obstructive. They've just never been shown. And I know that after our training, we have a lot of tears, often with the lady officers who have to bottle up a lot of their feelings a lot of the time and have become desensitized. But I've seen it with my own eyes, how our SAPS officers warm to the fact that, yes, they need to be more empathetic. They need to know how to communicate what is available to them, be it flashcards, be it an iPad, but communication is key, because there is no way any of these cases will ever see the light of day in a court unless our first responders and SAPS officers can get statements that are accurate, that will stand up, and also our inspectors and our persons taking the case forward fight for their right to go into a court setting. So in conclusion, last slide, please, Sean. This is how the unit is set up now. You can see the other side. This is an auxiliary social worker who works at the Boertesig unit on a part-time basis, on a voluntary basis, with a small stipend from us. And we have now seen an increase in the amount of persons reporting. That is what we were after. We would love to decrease GBVF crime completely, but we are actually in the business of upping the stats, not downing it. We want more people to come forward. The unit has proved that we can do so successfully, and we are very excited for the continuation. I'm very blessed that the fund is still with us this year and next year for more training and the 2 new units to roll out. So this is not the answer to all of our issues. We know that, but we firmly believe that it's a start, that we can collaborate with other MPOs who are referencing blind, referencing deaf, albinism, whichever ones that are, we're really open and wanting to work with everybody to make sure that our training is representative of all disability. It's a big task, but it's working so far, and we know that the officers and the first responders we have trained to date have gained a knowledge that they would never have received. So that is what we're about, and that is what we're doing. As I say, it's not the answer to all our problems, but we believe it is a good start, and we're not stopping here. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sue. I hope my mic is on. Is my mic on, Sean? I don't know what happened to the screen. Thank you, Sean. We've come to the end of the webinar, and I hope it will not just be a talk show, that it would be us going on and doing things from an individual perspective first, more than from just an organizational point. So, to show that the GBVF fund is committed to this work, this is what they want us to reflect on as part of their commitment and taking steps for advancing inclusivity and accountability in GBV prevention and response. Here's the first one. What recommendations are proposed for the optimization of the GBVF prevention? We need to look at that. Prevention intervention for persons with disabilities. Which critical stakeholders need to be engaged? The last one. What innovative solutions can be proposed to improve support for persons with disabilities in accessing GBVF prevention and response program? On that note, thank you very much to the GBVF Response Fund for even trusting me with this job, but also on behalf of South Africa, thank you very much for opening channels on, or even opening spaces, because these spaces belong to all of us. And also, Megan Garden, thank you very much for partnering with us as a media personality. I know that the impact on media in influencing perception and even behaviors to a certain extent. I hope we will continue to have these engagements, but more than anything, I hope we will change, and I hope we have worked on our own unconscious biases. Until next time, if we meet, may God bless you. Thank you very much. Ciao, ciao.
Yeah, my brother is basically mandated